handle the truth.
And hello, and welcome to Truth versus News. This is December 9th, the day that the judiciary hearings are going on, and we're getting the FISA report in. Quite a full day today, and we're filming on the morning of that. And I have one little thing I want to read, one sentence that says, "When was there such a corruption of the United States elite, from the academia to the news and entertainment media, the government bureaucracies, and the Congress? All of it together, one pulsating mass of filth, like a fistful of live worms from a bait bucket, as what is now exposed daily in the impeachment charade we're seeing before us. A lot of mess we're in here, so we're going to talk about that and other things that are really a concern to us. For the most dangerous mind in America, Jim Fetzer, which doesn't say much about his mind, but it says something terrific about the state of chaos in this country, and also Scott Bennett, a very good espionage intelligence officer out of the Army. It just gives great insight to what we have here. So why don't we take it away and see if we can cure up this mess, clean it up. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, thank you, Don. Astonishingly to me, the bureaucrats on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans alike, have prioritized political grandstanding over principle and have renewed the Patriot Act. Right. Making the U.S. The national surveillance state in the world, betraying the Constitution, who will protect us from an unpatriotic Patriot Act from Zero Hedge. This is by John Whitehead of the Rutherford Institute, which stands up for the First Amendment and the Bill of Rights. It's the responsibility of the patriot to protect his country from its government, observed Thomas Paine. While Congress subjects the nation to its impeachment-flavored brand of bread and circus politics, our civil liberties continue to die a slow, painful death by 1,000 cuts. Case in point, while Americans have been fixated on the carefully orchestrated impeachment drama that continues to monopolize headlines, Congress passed and President Trump signed into law legislation extending three key provisions of the USA Patriot Act, which had been set to expire on 15 December 2019. As Congressman Thomas Massey, Republican of Kentucky, predicted, today, while everyone is distracted by the impeachment drama, Congress will vote to extend warrantless data collection provisions of the Patriot Act by hiding this language on page 25 of the continuing revolution that temporarily funds the government. To sneak this through, Congress will first vote to suspend the rule, which otherwise gives us and the people 72 hours to consider a bill. The scam here is that Democrats are alleged abuse of presidential power while simultaneously reauthorizing warrantless power to spy on citizens no president should have in a bill that continues to fund everything the president does, and waiving their own rules to do it. I predict Democrats will vote on a party line to suspend the 72 hours, but after the rule is suspended, I suspect many Republicans will join most Democrats to pass the continuing resolution with the Patriot Act extension embedded therein. Massey was right. Republicans and Democrats have no problem joining forces in order to maintain their joint stranglehold on power. The legislation passes Senate with a bipartisan 74-20 vote. It squeaked through the House with a 231 to 192 margin, and it was signed by President Trump, who earlier this year floated the idea of making the government surveillance powers permanent, with nary a protest from anyone about its impact on the rights of the American people. Spending bill or not, it didn't have to shake out this way. Even with the threat of another government shutdown looming, Congress could have voted to separate the Patriot Act extension from the funding bill, as suggested by Representative Justin Amash, but that didn't fly. Instead, as journalist Norman Sullivan writes for Salon, they cave in with another bow to normalizing the U.S. government's mass surveillance powers. That's right. The key to this, right there, normalizing the U.S. government's mass surveillance powers. In the 18 years since the U.S. Patriot Act, a massive 342-page wish list of expanding powers to the FBI and CIA was rammed through Congress in the wake of the so-called 9/11 terror attack. It has snowballed into the eradication of every vital safeguard against government overreach, corruption, and abuse. It represents a dagger through the heart of the Bill of Rights. Meanwhile, the Inspector General report on the DOJ and FBI in relation to FISA requirements is going to be released today. The Department of Justice Office of Inspector Michael Hurwitz will release the much anticipated report covering a 21-month review of FBI and DOJ compliance with legal requirements today. The report is rumored to be over 600 pages. According to estimates, leaks, and prior IG report releases, it will likely be released to the public shortly after launch. In other words, even as we're speaking here today. Things to keep in mind. First, with a volume of text of over 600 pages, potentially as high as 1,000, there's no immediate analysis you'll find in the media today based on an actual review of the report. It's too long to read, review, and outline in that time. Therefore, all mainstream journalists will likely be reporting from pre-written talking points distributed by officials with a vested interest in shaping opinion. From my own experience, even after several days, very few journalists will have actually even read the full report. They will instead be working from selected segments as outlined by others. It strongly suggests that you read the report for yourself, draw your own conclusions, don't rely on what could be sections taken out of context. Obviously, crowdsourcing the report is one of the fastest ways to absorb information in a discussion thread. Second, keep in mind, while the IG review began in March of 2018, the Mueller investigation almost certainly kept many aspects of the material shielded from the IG inquiry until the special counsel investigation ended. Indeed, as we've seen from other delays, through March 2019, when the Mueller probe ended, many documents were hidden by the special counsel, so a full unimpeded IG report likely didn't begin until after the Mueller investigation concluded. Use this thread to share any information you find of value within the report. Be on the outlook for any material inside the IG report that stems from the list of classified documents previously requested to be declassified by Congress. It will be disappointing if the IG release does not also bring forth a considerable amount of declassified documentary material in support of its findings. As soon as the report is released, we'll start direct links and attempt to download and upload into shareable, hopefully searchable, embedded format. This is a big report. It can sometimes be problematic. Be on the outlook for the report about 1 p.m. Eastern, which of course would be noon Central here, 10 a.m. there, which we have just begun. Scott, your thoughts, your comments, your reaction.
Well, Don, if you go back to the slide number 10, I think that visual is very powerful and it deserves a recap of what we know with all the people there. On that slide, you see James Comey, you see Rod Rosenstein, you see Clapper, you see Andrew McCabe, you see Christopher Steele, you see Robert Mueller, you see Peter Strzok, you see Lisa Page and John Brennan. Working backwards, you know, with no relation to the scumbags, they're all equally poisonous and toxic. John Brennan was in charge of the CIA that coordinated intelligence operations against the Trump administration using assets, including Mifsud, including others that coordinated false entrapments of people like Papadopoulos, Manafort, using Ukraine and the Ukrainian corrupt officials to do this. This was John Brennan under CIA. John Brennan under CIA, who's also directly connected with Anthony Eric Ciaramella, the false leaker in the White House that was CIA, and that John Kelly made his chief of staff or his personal assistant. So Ciaramella, who is the quote whistleblower.
Don't you mean McMaster, Scott?
You may be right, Jim. McMaster.
Yeah.
I get them.
McMaster made his personal assistant. Yeah,
McMaster,
rather than sending him
thank you.
back to the CIA.
Right.
So McMaster, the fake military officer. I don't consider any of these people deserving of the title of soldier or anything regarding military. They betrayed their oath. But that was John Brennan. And all of this needs to be scrutinized by a cadre of military investigators and prosecutors. This is now a coup d'etat. This is a domestic enemy, a domestic mercenary operation, a domestic insurgency within the United States using color of law and long ties and business suits and lapel pins to camouflage their wickedness and their corruption and their unconstitutional behavior. Lisa Page, of course, and her coordination with her adulterer lover, Peter Strzok, tried to infiltrate the White House and find a spy under the vice president's office to further their operation of a coup d'etat against the president. They also, of course, investigated and trapped Michael Flynn, who foolishly talked to them. But of course, he's military and he's not expecting anything other than constitutional, we're all on the same team. No, he wasn't. He was on the wrong team because he was exposing pedophilia at the highest levels of the government. He was on John B. Wells talking about pedophilia. And that's one of the key reasons why they came after him, and they're going after a lot of these operations, as we see unfolding in the foreign espionage behind the Epstein Mossad child trafficker, which Mueller is tied to, of course, in his role as FBI in the government prior. Christopher Steele behind Mueller, of course. We see writing of false dossiers, false information paid for by GPS, the Clinton Foundation, the Democrats, as well as intelligence from Ukraine to Libya. So Christopher Steele, the MI6, the British were enemies against Trump. Andrew McCabe, the FBI director, sent 4 FBI agents to Senator Dick Black's office to try and entrap him into a false trip over to Syria, probably to kill him, in order for Andrew McCabe's wife, Jill McCabe, to be planted into Senator Black's seat, as Terry McAuliffe and Hillary Clinton tried to coordinate. So Andrew McCabe is guilty of crimes, just let alone by trying to make his wife substitute Dick Black's position. And of course, Clapper in the background, who is a former Booz Allen guy. He was the one who lied before Congress when he said the NSA does not spy on Americans. And Edward Snowden, a colleague of mine at Booz Allen Hamilton, released that information that it was false. Rod Rosenstein launched this initial special prosecutor investigation. Rod Rosenstein was the one who brought in Mueller to do this false witch hunt, this false hoax, this false psychological operation that was designed to try and throw smoke and feces at the president. That was Rod Rosenstein. And that was because of Senator Jeff Sessions, who received my report Shell Game in 2013 when he was a senator, as well as many others. So Jeff Sessions is implicated. His picture should be put up there. He's not deserving of being called a Republican. He should have the lapel pin ripped from his chest and stuck to his forehead. And of course, James Comey, who wrote a pro-homosexual Supreme Court argument when he was in the FBI, championing gay marriage, which may be a sideline hobby of his. James Comey, who is responsible for a lot of the, if not all of the FBI operations. James Comey, who was trying to further solidify his position by becoming FBI director under Trump, and he was not. And he immediately released a typed note, allegedly, of his meeting with the president, which was classified. Every meeting with the president is classified until he says otherwise. And James Comey needs to be prosecuted for all of this. So this band of demons, this band of traitors, of domestic enemies of the United States, needs to be clearly examined and investigated and prosecuted by the president under a special military tribunal, because they are enemies of the state. They are domestic enemies who have tried to overthrow the United States government, and they should be hung by the neck until dead, constitutionally and legally. Jim?
Scott, a question about the renewal of the Patriot Act, which I gather is for 3 months. It seemed to me Trump might very well have vetoed the legislation, but are there reasons why perhaps 3 months hence would be better timing from his point of view?
I think so, because it gives him the tools to use against his enemies. It gives him the ability to let things be quiet, because if he did veto it, you would have everybody under the sun who's a hawk, a lot of Republicans throwing up their arms in fury about it because they want to go to war, and this is a way to do it. And it could blow back on the president, and it could cost him votes in the impeachment process. So he has to do everything that the Hawks and the Republicans and the conservatives want done in the Senate if he is to keep his majority and not be allowed to be impeached by the Democrats. I think that's part of his variables in his calculation. But it is an unconstitutional act. It needs to be brought again in front of the Supreme Court, that you cannot obtain any materials on any Americans, whether it's documents or phone calls or videotapes, without a warrant, because the United States government is paid for by the tax dollars of Americans to do their best interest, not to spy on Americans with the purpose of prosecuting them, like they did to Michael Flynn, like they did to Paul Manafort, like they did to Roger Stone, all of which are false prosecutions and should be thrown out as fruit of the poisonous tree. But this is what happens when a fascist, out of control, religiously fanatical government that worships the state, as the Democrats do, sees anybody as disrupting the administrative state and the enlightened people who run it. If you represent a threat to that stability in chaos, they are going to use these tools to come out against you. So it needs to be overthrown, but the president's timing has to be, I think, after this whole impeachment thing is settled, so it can't be used as a license against him.
Good thoughts, good thoughts. Meanwhile, the beat goes on. Pelosi calls on Nadler to write up articles of impeachment. It's totally fabricated. According to Pelosi, the facts are uncontested. I think that's correct, but she's spinning them the opposite way. The president abuses power for his own personal political benefit at the expense of our national security by withholding military aid and a crucial Oval Office meeting in exchange for an announcement of an investigation into his political rival. Sadly, but with confidence and humility, with allegiance to our founders and our hearts full of love for America, today I'm asking our chairman of the Judiciary Committee to proceed with articles of impeachment, referring to Gerald Nadler. The president leaves us no choice but to act because he's trying to corrupt once again the election for his own benefit. Pelosi made the remarks after the judiciary held a hearing in which 3 constitutional law experts called by the Democrats claimed Trump had engaged in conduct representing impeachable offense. A 4th, however, called the Democrat-led impeachment inquiry rushed and flawed. He was right. They were wrong. Democrats have accused Trump of abusing his power by withholding $391 million in security aid to Ukraine, a U.S. ally facing Russian aggression, to pressure Ukrainian President Zelensky to announce the investigation. Trump has denied any wrongdoing, quite appropriately, and called the impeachment investigation a hoax. Here are key moments from this first hearing with the 3 attorneys. President Trump committed impeachable offenses. 3 scholars invited by the Democrats testify said that Trump's effort to pressure Ukraine for political gain clearly met the historical definition of impeachable offenses. I don't believe that for a second. Case against Trump is slipshod and premature. A scholar invited by Republicans said, Jonathan Turley, who's a serious guy, not a hack or a political partisan, a law professor at George Washington University, who was invited to testify by the Republicans, offered the lone dissent that he should not be impeached. It's fascinating that Ron Paul has been observing a lot of what's going on here and why this is also threatening. A recent Newsweek headline stated, popularity of socialism spiking in U.S. with 43% saying it would be good for the country. If we choose to do nothing, the America you and I love could cease to exist. Believing Trump is a walking dead man politically, Democrats are falling over themselves to out-radical each other, including supporting outright gun confiscation. As Beto O'Rourke, the Texas Democrat, said, when all other Democrats are thinking, hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15 and your AK-47. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez so-called Green New Deal to ban cars, air travel, force every building in America to be rebuilt, and people unwilling to work taxpayer-funded welfare pay it. Estimates of the scheme could cost up to $92 trillion. I mean, it's insane. Crack down on religious institutions and no profits who don't bow to the altar of government-defined morality. Medicare for all, that is European-style socialized medicine, which would send costs of taxpayers skyrocketing, quality of care sinking, and forced rationing, enabling government bureaucrats to decide who gets care and who doesn't. The flat-out elimination of the First Amendment by muzzling grassroots Americans, an organization like Campaign for Liberty, with a ball of bureaucratic red tape, and then censoring all online speech that isn't government approved.
Oh, God.
Under the guise of combating hate, hacking the U.S. Supreme Court with big government apologists who say things like America is a free country, means the government gets to do whatever it wants. Now they're using the threat of impeachment to force the president to the bargaining table. Scott, I think this reflects the seriousness of this impeachment effort, because were the Democrats to get in charge, it would be catastrophic. I think Ron Paul is sounding the alarm.
Well, we've known this for a while, that the Democrats are desperate to cover up their crimes, because their crimes have cascaded, have avalanched ever since Trump was made the Republican National Committee contender, the presidential nominee. That's when they actually, I mean, I think they started an intelligence operation before that. That's what really implicates the government misuse of resources, is that they were actively targeting an opposition figure to the Democrat regime under Barack Obama that was involved in some of the greatest crimes of corruption in the history of the United States. And I know personally Shell Game, which started in 2009, involving Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer and the Department of Justice and Loretta Lynch, coordinating with the Department of Treasury under Tim Geithner and Hillary Clinton at the State Department, and Hillary Clinton's minions at the Clinton Foundation, working and translating and coordinating through the law firm Covington and Burling. Covington and Burling that prior had hired and employed Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer. They also hired my boss's son, Roger Zakheim, Dov Zakheim, his father, who was the comptroller at the Pentagon during the Pentagon attacks, who testified about the missing $1.8 billion or so.
$2.3 trillion.
Thank you. All of this is part of this massive conspiracy and pay-to-play operation and corruption, which is all there. It's all black and white. It's all documented. That was the golden goose that I discovered when I was thrown in prison by the Obama administration, misdirected from California up to Pennsylvania, where white hats kind of opened the door and introduced me to Brad Birkenfeld, the Swiss banker who had all of these documents and bank files and WikiLeaks cables. So all of this can be testified about, all of it can be proven, all of it is in the court, the government and the court records. I filed an action in court when I discovered this, demanding to be released to be able to testify to the Pentagon, and the judge, Virginia Hernandez Covington, who was related to Covington and Burling by marriage, stopped me, of course.
Scott, how could she serve in that role when there's such a blatant conflict of interest?
Nobody knew at the time, Jim. Nobody knew at the time.
Unbelievable.
And it is. But all of this is known by people who've been part of it. It's known by Senator Dianne Feinstein, who communicated with Senator Bill Nelson about me and Snowden. It's known by Congressman Mark DeSaulnier, who I met with and sat down in his office 3 times and videotaped it and gave him a report demanding he act. It's known by Eric Swalwell. It's known by over 100 different senators and congressmen who were exposed to this. This is all leading up to why the Democrats, I think, are in such panic mode, because it's not just this one crime, it's everything. It's all of the above. Everything that's happened to America under the Obama administration has been designed to destroy the constitutional freedoms of the republic and transform us into a socialist administrative state, police state, where citizens are essentially worker drones, and they are not to do anything but work and produce. and not create wholesome families and children, but to import foreign labor from Mexico and third world countries. This is the grand design of the hell on earth, which represents the Democrat personality. Jim?
I do think the beehive or social insect model is appropriate here, Scott, where they do want everyone to be the underlings to serve the interests of the rich, the powerful, and the deep state. It's astonishing. Don, I know you have a comment.
Yeah, real quickly, the last quote you said there, Jim, before we got to Scott, was one about people are free to do whatever they want as long as the government approves. Well, that's a quote that sort of what somebody else said in Italy, a guy named Mussolini. Is that where we're headed, folks? And I will say Scott's book here about Shilligan, he's revealed a lot in this fantastic book that he wrote in prison. And it's just something else, the price Scott has had to pay to expose, well, some pretty deep corruption in this country here. And so, like I say, we're in a mess right now, and it's all being right in your face, right?
Don, you got it right. Here, I think, is an article that gets to the heart of the matter. Is the impeachment effort simply a political ploy to win votes for Democrats in 2020? This is by Michael Snyder. He's a good guy, usually spot on. Could it be possible Nancy Pelosi and their minions in the House had a completely different goal than we thought this entire time? As you will see, the Democrats in the House plan to impeach Trump. It could potentially happen by the end of this month, but there appears to be zero chance he would be removed from office by the Senate. Many, therefore, will consider that to be a major victory for the Republicans. So why is Nancy Pelosi pushing ahead when she knows the impeachment effort is destined to fail? Is it possible this entire drama has simply been a political ploy to win votes in November of 2020, of which I have had no doubt from the beginning? Remember, Al Green said, if we don't impeach this guy, he will get reelected. So they're using the impeachment as an effort to tarnish Trump. It's part of their campaign strategy for 2020, not in any serious expectation he could actually be removed from office. Many have assumed that a backlash against impeachment will greatly benefit Trump, but history has not been kind to other presidents who've gone through an impeachment process. In 1868, President Andrew Johnson was impeached by Republicans. He wasn't convicted, but Republicans went on to win the next presidential election in '74. Richard Nixon resigned rather than face almost certain impeachment. Democrats won the next presidential election, even though they had a relatively weak candidate in Jimmy Carter. In 1998, Republicans in the House impeached Bill Clinton, but the Senate did not remove him from office. However, Republicans wound up winning the presidential election in 2000. Remember, that, of course, was stolen from Al Gore in Florida. So that means the opposition party is 3 for 3 in cases similar to what we're facing now. Could that actually be the key number top Democrats are looking at? On Thursday, Pelosi announced the House is moving forward with articles. One CNN article sounded almost giddy. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi moved the House much closer to impeachment Thursday when she officially directed the Judiciary Committee to drop articles of impeachment as if it wasn't already. But her announcement all but guarantees that President Trump will be impeached. This is happening, people. But Trump is not going to be removed from office, and millions of Democrats are going to be deeply disappointed when that does not take place. Of course, Pelosi has never suggested her effort would be successful and continues to insist her hand was forced by Trump. I'm really sorry the president made this necessary by his complete disregard for the vision of our founders, she told reporters. And impeachment is not a pleasant experience. It can be divisive. Yep. We don't take any glee in this at all. It's heartbreaking. But the president gave us no choice. What Pelosi is attempting to do is take the moral high ground. Her intended audience is voters in the middle of the spectrum because they are those who will be decisive in 2020. And it appears things could move along rather rapidly in the House. In fact, NBC News is reporting House Democrats are being told not to make plans for the weekend just prior to Christmas. Pelosi did not say whether she had set a deadline for committees to write the articles or when a full House vote would take place. Members who attended a closed-door caucus meeting on Wednesday, however, said they understood the House would vote on articles before the holiday recess. One member said they were told not to make plans for December 21st or 22nd, the weekend before Christmas. I've been warning for months that Democrats were going to impeach Trump, but at first a lot of people didn't believe me. At this point, even Donald Trump appears resigned to the fact that he will be impeached. But as Jonathan Turley testified, this is actually an abuse of power by the Democrats.
Yep.
Sadly, most Democrats in Congress don't seem to understand they're tearing the country apart, which could have serious implications in the not too distant future. But in Washington, winning is everything. And Democrats are absolutely obsessed with November 2020. Just consider what Pelosi told a CNN town hall Thursday. Let's not even contemplate that, Pelosi said at a CNN town hall Thursday in response to an audience question about what checks will exist in the House of Representatives. Trump is reelected and the impeachment process is over. Civilization as we know it today is at stake in the next election, and certainly our planet, Pelosi said. Completely absurd. She knows the Senate won't vote to convict Trump, but that's not what she's after. Her grand plan has always been to damage Trump for the 2020 election. Only time will show whether her effort is successful. Indeed, here's the latest version of the Democrats' position. Although President Trump didn't break the law, he surely intended to, and therefore he's guilty. It's that bad. The Democrat position in their impeachment of President Trump is that although he did nothing wrong, he meant to, and therefore they must impeach him. Breitbart reported the Democratic position is absurd, has become the Salem witch trial. The House Judiciary stating the president can be impeached for motives, even without breaking the law. The conservative Treehouse also reported on this use of the word intent that the Obama administration added to the legal system. Get this. Defining statutory violations by the intent of the violator is specifically attributable to how President Obama, AG Eric Holder, and AG Loretta Lynch changed the entire enterprise of lawful application to make outcomes arbitrary, variable, changeable to the situation. The IRS targeting wasn't unlawful because it wasn't intentional. The death of 4 Americans due to sketchy CIA and State Department operation in Benghazi was not unlawful because the risky situation wasn't created intentionally. Hillary Clinton's private email server with classified information wasn't intentional, et cetera, et cetera. The list is long. The nice thing about switching the definition of lawbreaking by intent is the ease of arbitrary application. Republican targets largely intend to violate laws. Democrats, however, not so much. Fluidity is a necessary oil amid a two-tiered administrative state. So now they have nothing on Trump. The Democrats are saying, nevertheless, he intended to commit crimes and therefore must be impeached. What insanity. Yep. They have nothing to go on. Meanwhile, President Trump's approval rating has jumped 5 points in 1 week after the Democrats announced a sham impeachment. Despite Pelosi's sham impeachment proceedings, his approval rate reached 51% on Friday. Obama's approval rate at the same time in his presidency was only 45%, 6 points behind Trump's numbers. This is also despite national mainstream media reporting negatively on the highly successful president 96% of the time. Wow. Barack Obama had a cakewalk with the media despite one of the worst records in the U.S. history. At the beginning of last week, Trump's approval was only 46%. After Pelosi announced her sham impeachment, the president's approval soared 5 points to 51. Scott, fascinating situation here. It doesn't appear to be working, and the Democrats are trying to make a plausible case about an absurd situation.
Yeah, without evidence of an impeachable offense, this whole thing is sedition. I mean, it's really treason, as I called it a couple of weeks ago. I haven't seen anything to change my opinion. Have you?
Yes, you're right, Don. It is sedition, and your legal-minded instincts need to be polished and sharpened to insert truth through the syringe of this show into the bloodstream of the American body politic and cleanse it of this toxicity, this sepsis this political death that is representative of the Democrat theory. I mean, the movie Alien Covenant, where they drop this black liquid on people and it just explodes them from inside. That's what the Democrat ideology does to people. It consumes them in this black charred monstrosity of self-hatred, hatred of God, hatred of family, worship of the state, sexual perversion and schizophrenia and lesbianism or homosexuality or gay marriage, all of this stuff, and worshiping of the state and the police state. Now we're entering the dark medieval times of America. We're being enabled to enter this dark period because of the schizophrenia that's been foisted upon the American public since after 1975. I think Carter began the introduction of it. Reagan sort of blipped, electrocuted life back into the country, except he was undermined by George Bush Sr. He was attempted to be assassinated by George Bush Sr. Then George Bush Sr. was the one who initiated this with the war against Saddam Hussein, the first Desert Storm War that was totally unnecessary, total deception. And it was orchestrated with, again, the British, Margaret Thatcher and the British Crown, and the LaRouche guys have done a good analysis of that. Then Clinton came in, and everything started dying right there with Clinton, who is the rapist, a serial rapist who's been on the Epstein Lolita Express, where these poor girls from broken families are lured into prostitution and having sex with scumbags with bent penises like Bill Clinton, and the lesbian witches who skin kids and do all sorts of things, Hillary Clinton, Uma Abedin and Weiner, her husband. All of that was exposed by Pizzagate. Jim, you've done some extraordinary work in that as well. And the homosexual man-boy love symbolism is rampant throughout this. It was rampant in Pizzagate. It was all over the artwork of Giselle Maxwell, who was the Mossad operative who engaged in this activity. All of this, again, is the underlining crimes that the Democrats are panicking over. And Nancy Pelosi's feeble attempt and the Democrats' feeble attempt to try and generate something to, again, force lies onto the American public is going to fail, because Americans have hit their saturation point. I've said it before. There's a saturation point where Americans have said, enough. We've heard enough about this. We've been going through it for 2 or 3 years. You told us that Russia was invading Detroit, that Russia was meddling with the election. And part of us said, who gives a crap? We have no beef with Russia. And Russia and President Putin had said, yes, I like Trump because he was going to renew relations. I like Trump because he didn't want to go to war with everybody like Obama and Hillary Clinton and John Kerry and all these clowns were. Victoria Nuland, Chalupa. Ukraine was a prime example of that. That's why Putin liked Trump. That's why Americans like Trump. So the Democrats are just out of their minds. And you see this when Nancy Pelosi was walking off stage and James Rosen, the Fox News reporter, said, do you hate President Trump? And she just went apeshit crazy. She just popped a brain cell and came over with her Wicked Witch gnarled long finger and her half done facelift. And she says, don't you say this to me. I was a Catholic. You're no more than a Catholic than the devil himself. Nancy Pelosi has nothing to do with Catholic ritual tradition or moral values. Nancy Pelosi is about sticking ice picks up women's vaginals and destroying fetuses and embryos. That's what she's about. She's about every perversion of sexuality and morality you can imagine. So there is no Catholicism in Nancy Pelosi or really any of these Democrats that vote that way. I'm separating the social issues. Everybody can make their own choices, but don't call yourself a moral person if you're advancing this as part of the national agenda. So Nancy Pelosi is coming apart of the seams. She recognizes that the American public are not behind this impeachment operation and that it is doomed to fail. So she's trying to rush it through quickly, Jim. She's trying to push it so she can say, well, at least we tried. We did our best. Now let's move on to the next investigation. Let's move on to the next scandal. Let's see what else we can gin up so that we can try our best to psychologically traumatize the American public to the point where they will be susceptible to the Manchurian candidate assassination operation the Democrats are probably going to orchestrate at the Democrat National Committee or sooner or after. to try and browbeat and traumatize Americans into not voting Republican, staying home, or maybe switching sides and voting Democrats. That's the only way they could possibly win against Trump. Mitt Romney, who incidentally got shell game back in 2012 when he was running against Obama and did nothing, Mitt Romney is going to probably vote against the president. He should be kicked out of office, if not worse. And Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who's a Democrat that was put back in there, and her father was a Democrat. And Collins of Maine, I think, is they're rumored to vote against Trump. But again, it's going to fail. And I tell you this, if they did remove Trump, it would be a civil war in this country. I honestly think Americans would say that is the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's obvious we don't have a republic anymore. It's obvious we have tyrants and domestic enemies occupying positions of political power. Now it's on. It's a civil war. All bets are off, and all claims to authority are null and void and dissolved and disintegrated. When in the course of human events it is required to dissolve political ties, this is an episode and an incident that marks such an occasion. And if they do try and impeach Trump, and if they do impeach him and they ask him to move or to get out, I hope he stands his ground and says, no, this is a domestic attack, and I'm calling every military person, every retired military person, every biker, every American patriot with a gun to stand with me and overthrow this domestic enemy. And he would find the vast majority of Americans, every conservative with a gun, would stand on his side. Jim?
I think you got it right, Scott.
Oh, absolutely.
And of course, this is also a reason why they want to take our guns. They know they can't overthrow the republic without it. Further substantiation that the impeachment is really to garner votes comes from the Democrats themselves. Hold the House. House Democrats will almost certainly impeach President Trump before Christmas, which will make him, I believe, a third president in U.S. history to be impeached. But they still need to decide which articles to officially bring forward. We need your input. Get this. They're asking for the public to serve as a focus group to tell them what articles to use to bring against Trump. If this doesn't show it's a sham, what else could possibly be required?
Amen.
You want to charge him with abuse of power and bribery, with obstruction of justice, with obstruction of Congress, all of the above? Unsure? What Tommy rot? Meanwhile, CNN's prime time town hall with Nancy Pelosi was a ratings flop. Yikes. This is embarrassing. Thursday, just hours after speaking, Pelosi announced she was instructing House Judiciary Chair Jerry Nadler to move forward on articles of impeachment. She appeared on CNN for a televised town hall. The much-hyped event, moderated by Jake Tapper, was planned ahead of time. But the timing of Pelosi's announcement seems just a bit convenient. The House Speaker is asked to proceed with articles of impeachment just before she comes on. How fortunate Pelosi made it clear they're moving forward on articles of impeachment just before the town hall, right? She joins Jake Tapper at 9 p.m. Eastern to discuss what happens next in the impeachment process and more. They're going for it. The town hall averaged 1.6 million viewers, including 410,000 in the crucial age 25 to 54 demographic. Meanwhile, Fox regular primetime lineup averaged 3.4, better than twice as many million viewers, including 565,000 in that same demographic, according to Nielsen, where Fox April town hall with Bernie remains the highest rated town hall of the 2020 election cycle, having averaged 2.6 million viewers. So the Pelosi town hall fell flat. Meanwhile, it appears the real winner on Thursday night was Fox News. During the town hall, she made it clear the push for impeachment is completely political. The impeachment town hall, Pelosi stressed the importance of denying President Trump a second term. Here she's saying it directly from the head horse's mouth. Aren't you sorry you missed that gem of a program? The push for impeachment isn't just diametrically opposed to what several leading Democrats had said during the Clinton impeachment, going so far as to call it a partisan lynching, but it's not working out well so far. The further this goes, the more apparent that it's a partisan power play. Unfortunately for the Democrats, it seems to be backfiring. Trump and the GOP are raking in cash for 2020, and voters in swing states just don't like it. Polls in key 2020 states show support for impeaching Trump is lower than national impeachment polls, according to an analysis by the Washington Post. Why it matters? The polls signal that pursuing impeachment could potentially hurt Democrats in states they need to carry to defeat Trump in his bid for a second term. By the numbers, in a dozen October and November polls on impeachment in battleground states like Arizona, Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. An average of 44% support impeachment, but 51% oppose. Not a good sign. Meanwhile, CNN ratings dropped to a 3-year low amid constant impeachment coverage. It's been over 2 months since House Speaker Pelosi announced the impeachment of Trump, and CNN has been running nonstop coverage of all the latest developments. In retrospect, that may not have been the best idea. With round-the-clock coverage, viewership of the rabidly partisan far-left media outlet has actually tumbled to 3-year lows. Nielsen reported CNN recorded its lowest primetime rating in nearly 3 years during the week of November 25th. Even more embarrassing for Jerry Zucker, Fox News recorded higher ratings than MSNBC and CNN combined. Fox News recorded 2.2 million viewers in the primetime hours of 9 to 11 p.m. ET from November 25th through December 1st. MSNBC saw around 1.3 million, while CNN averaged 643,000. CNN's worst performance in nearly 3 years. The liberal network's worst turnout among key demographic of adults in the 25 to 54 and over 5 years. Primetime viewers, Fox, 2.2 million. MSNBC, 1.3 million. CNN, 643,000. Fox News has dominated the cable news arena for the 47th consecutive week, averaging a little over 1.3 million viewers. Total day viewers, Fox, 1.33 million. MSNBC, 781,000. CNN, 539,000. As CNN plummeted to historic lows, its conservative foil continued to enjoy strong viewership as episodes of Hannity, Tucker Carlson Tonight, The Ingram Angle, The Story with Martha McCollum, and Special Report with Brett Bauer account for 15 of the 30 most watched telecasts across all of cable during the holiday weekend. Is CNN's Trump derangement syndrome starting to bore most Americans, even liberals? Considering that the network's special town hall event with Pelosi, the day she announced articles of impeachment, only averaged 1.6 million and 410,000 in the demo on Thursday night, well behind both Fox and MSNBC in both categories. It looks that way. The American people, at least those who still watch cable, are increasingly ditching objective, impartial mainstream media outlets and tuning out or moving to conservative outlets at a time when House Democrats have been focused on just one thing, not how to govern the nation, but all their energy on impeaching the president. It appears, however, the American people are tired of this farce, desperate to move on. So far, very few Democrats seem to have got the memo. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, again, I think the entire impeachment program is going to be falling apart more and more and more as the branches of this entire Democrat coup d'etat, domestic overthrow of government through deception operations, through the misuse of government power, through the abusive process, through violations of the constitutional rights of people like Carter Page and George Papadopoulos. And, you know, that is 18 USC 242, the intentional interference of a person's constitutional rights. And I think the civil code is 42 USC 1983 that allows a person to sue for the interference of their constitutional rights. They did this to people. They did it to me. And I'm always refreshed when I see these potential lawsuits. And it's going to come against the Department of Justice and the FBI. And of course, one of the things that's going to come out today, and John Solomon's already written about it, is the IG report lays out compelling evidence the FBI misled FISA court in the Russia case. And Solomon goes on to talk about it. The evidence of false statements, false information, deception through omission is going to raise the opportunity for William Barr to rebuke the entire FBI application for surveillance warrants that began in October 2016. It's all fruit of the poisonous tree. And the principle, as Don knows well, the fruit of the poisonous tree is if one piece of fruit is poisonous, then the whole tree has to be discarded. So when they provide a false document or a false testimony to a judge that Carter Page or Mickey Mouse or someone did something, and it's proven to be factually, intentionally wrong, and not even intentionally, just wrong, it's inaccurate, then the entire case is dismissed, is thrown out because it's tainted. It's fruit of the poisonous tree. So everything that they did to General Michael Flynn is made fruit of the poisonous tree because of the behavior, because of the documentations, the abuses of Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, James Comey, all of these people, not even including the intelligence weaponization that was done through John Brennan and James Comey and these other traitors, these seditionists that should be executed because of what they've tried to do. So all of this, again, really points to a civil war coming, Jim, because the mental instability of the Democrats is palpable. It's seen. It's going to become increasingly worse. You know, as Christians, I hear a lot of people talking about, well, the end times and the apocalypse and the Armageddon and blah, 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 blah. And Israel, you know, somehow has to be supported at all political costs, you know, to usher in this next TV guide episode, all of which is lies, total heresy. It's nothing to do with biblical unfolding of prophecy or God's timeline. Christian Zionism is the greatest deception that's ever walked the earth. But all of this is pointing to the facts that the Democrats and the heathen and the godless and these lunatics that hate Trump are really losing their minds. Now, does that mean they're going to suddenly have a moment of clarity? They're going to come to their right mind, like the demoniac, or all these other episodes where they come back to their sense of reality? Or are they going to run headfirst into a pack of swine and destroy themselves in a lake of fire? Are they going to just totally come apart at the seams and go defecating on the streets and lighting themselves on fire, as we've seen, or doing all sorts of things because they cannot handle the mental, spiritual revelations coming out, you know, from them? And that is going to drive reasonable conservatives, libertarians, blue dog Democrats, normal, you know, decent, healthy people. I think they're going to be driven to the right side of the political spectrum in supporting Trump because the left has become so toxic, so scary, so insane, so violent, so Antifa prone, so war with the entire world, that the Americans are going to run away from that side of fascist hostility and extremism, and Trump is going to win the elections hands down. The only thing that Trump has to be very careful of is not to be lured into a false flag attack against Iran or Russia. He needs to put foreign policy on the back burner, let things calm down, be the nicest, friendliest, most hopeful guy he can to these countries to peel them away from communist China. The communist Chinese are the ones who have the most to gain if Trump is impeached, and they are the most hostile and active in the domestic political disruption of the United States. That's why Trump really has to double down on the information operations against communist China and start invading communist China from the other free republic countries or those that are about to be free. Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, all of these countries need to be leveraged to kill China with the death of 1,000 cuts or 1,000 ideas being floated as truth into the Chinese mind. Jim?
Don, I know you have thoughts.
Oh boy, well, Scott is just so right on, and the system is so corrupt and everything else. I mean, you said it all. I just exclamation point.
The fruit of the poisonous tree, of course, means that if the warrant that initiated a certain sequence of investigation or the pursuit of certain legal objective is flawed, if it's not
Mhm.
properly justified, then any consequences that may emerge, even if they found bona fide important evidence, cannot be used. It's no longer admissible in a court of law because it was improperly obtained. So
Yes.
it really is crucial that this warrant, the FISA warrant, was completely improper, which vitiates the entire sequence of events that followed thereafter, including any of these convictions that are based upon this improper and unjustified, legally unjustified, and therefore legally inadmissible procedure, which is being exposed on the right and on the left. And I know Don stands on the same
Oh, yeah.
point with this regard as do all three of us.
Jim,
Sure.
let me just say quickly, Sidney Powell issued a statement in a tweet that General Flynn's sentencing has been delayed again because of this release of the Inspector General report, precisely because it's going to provide evidence and material that she can then present to the court to say, you see, this entire thing that we've been saying for years is proven in the IG report, and the corruption and the fruit of the poisonous tree is so overwhelming, and the government is so desperate to cover it up. This court cannot do anything but dismiss this case if it wants to maintain the illusion of justice. If not, we know where America stands. It is in a Nazi fascist administrative state, and the courts have absolutely no power. That's the position Sidney Powell has put the court in with regards to General Flynn's case. And these revelations that are coming out, she is going to effectively throw all of this out, and Michael Flynn needs to come back onto the football field and be a tackler for the president and go hunting with a special military crew into all of these agencies and expose these people. Just the psychological trauma alone, it's like Godzilla. You can't see over the mountain, but you can hear his roar, and everybody starts abandoning the buildings because they know what's coming. Jim?
Without any doubt, Michael Flynn was a major threat to the deep state because of his vast background in intelligence. He could cut through the smoke and mirrors and would not have allowed Trump to be manipulated by false information about world events. Therefore, they had to do something to get him off the scene and replace him with phonies, frauds, and hypocrites like McMaster, who would promote the undermining of the Trump administration using whistleblowers of a phony character like Eric Caramella. It's a disgrace, and it's all coming clear. Don, take us out.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's about time we have to take a break here. This has been the first hour of Truth versus News, and I really thank you very much for watching us on the 9th of December. It's going to be a historic day, and we're right in the middle of it. And I will say, you mentioned about Pelosi and Catholic, and I will have to say that I'm afraid that a Catholic church is a corrupted church. I mean, pedophilia, all the stuff that's going on in that church, you should see that church. And I will say that one thing that's important to me is that God has no religion. Religion is God, man's creation, trying to define the undefinable who created this magnificent world. And believe me, it's all a matter of indoctrination and everything else that is not good. So I hate to leave you on that point, but